In the opening segment of the transcript, Oliver Mark introduces himself in a way that immediately captures attention through vivid self-description and authenticity. He distinguishes himself as a real honest-to-goodness badge-carrying cop, a protector who embodies the protect and serve philosophy, emphasizing his commitment to upholding the law. Oliver's introduction is both personal and unapologetic. He highlights that in today's society, he feels almost like a unicorn for genuinely believing in that ideal. His physical description, standing 6'2", built like a linebacker, and described as darker than a moonless night, serves not only as a detail of personal pride but also subtly underscores the unique challenges and prejudices he anticipates facing as a black police officer in his line of duty. The narrative is set on a Tuesday morning, a day he hints is already unusual, helping establish an offbeat tone that suggests even the routine can be fraught with unexpected twists. Oliver's mention of Sergeant Miller's raised eyebrow and pointed finger indicates that his workplace culture is one where hierarchy and accountability are taken seriously. This detail also foreshadows potential conflicts arising from differing expectations within the precinct. As he describes his morning, we learn that his uniform is crisp and clean and his badge gleaming, symbolizing pride and professionalism. The juxtaposition of his readiness to fight crime or fill out paperwork humorously captures the mundane realities of law enforcement, hinting at the sometimes bureaucratic nature of his job. This opening also paints a clear picture of Oliver's connection to his local environment. He has a routine that centers around the local coffee shop, a familiar haven where he enjoys his favorite oat milk latte enriched with brown sugar syrup. The specificity of this drink, described as to die for, not only humanizes him but also grounds the story in relatable, everyday details. The introductory part is crafted to immediately draw the audience into Oliver Mark's world. His self-assured narration positions him as a competent and respected officer, while his candid description of himself as a black man in uniform brings forward the dual layers of pride and vulnerability that his identity entails. This layered self-portrait establishes expectations that his encounters, however routine they may seem, can be viewed through the lens of his personal experience and the broader societal context of race, authority, and public perception. Moreover, the opening segment is rich with subtle humor and irony. Oliver's observation that being a cop who believes wholeheartedly in protecting and serving makes him practically a unicorn communicates a blend of optimism and dry wit. It also hints that his path may be unexpectedly solitary, navigating a world that often seems at odds with the principles he holds dear. This combination of humor, detailed self-portrayal, and a tight focus on establishing routine sets the stage for the chaotic events that soon follow. In summary, Part 1 serves as a concise yet potent introduction that establishes Oliver Mark's identity, values, and the ordinary world he inhabits, a world that is immediately poised for disruption. Though the narrative is anchored in the familiar morning ritual of grabbing a coffee, it also prefigures the extraordinary encounters ahead, ensuring that the audience is both engaged and curious about what unfolds next in his day. After a few moments in his car under the soft glow of the rising sun, Oliver Mark finally parked outside his favorite local coffee shop. The black paint of his car caught the morning light as he stepped out, already savoring thoughts of that perfect oat milk latte with brown sugar syrup, a concoction that had quickly become his ritual before stepping into the day's challenges. As he made his way toward the entrance, his crisp uniform and gleaming badge spoke for themselves. He was a genuine cop, here to protect and serve with real integrity. No sooner had he taken a few steps toward the counter than a voice, sharp, abrasive, and dripping with contempt, cut through the pleasant hum of the early morning. Oliver turned just in time to see her, Leslie Marie. Her aggressively blonde bob and tightly wound expression instantly alerted him to trouble. Clutching a designer handbag as though it were a suit of armor, she fixed him with a stare that could curdle milk. "Excuse me," she barked, her voice rising so sharply that it momentarily drowned out the ambient chatter. "You're impersonating a police officer." Oliver paused, taken aback by the accusation. He knew all too well the type of disgruntled citizen who fancied themselves the arbiter of authority, and today, apparently, he had attracted one of those types. Keeping his tone calm and even, he replied, "Yes, ma'am, I am the police." Slowly, he produced his badge. The polished metal shimmered in the morning sun as he held it aloft, each detail perfectly legible. But Leslie Marie's reaction was as swift as it was disdainful. Squinting at the badge with a mixture of suspicion and derision, she snapped, "That's a toy, a cheap imitation. You probably bought it online. I bet you have a criminal record, too." Her words stung, not only because they questioned his authority but because of the baseless insult aimed at his character. Oliver felt a familiar mix of irritation and sorrow. He had spent years upholding the law, and here was someone determined to make a spectacle of it. Suppressing his exasperation, he attempted once more to explain. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is no toy, I'm a sworn officer. I have a job to do, and right now, I need to get to work." Even as he spoke, he could sense that Leslie Marie was not prepared to listen to reason. Instead, her tone escalated into a screech as she pointed an accusing finger at him. "Don't you walk away from me. I'm calling 911. I'm reporting a fraud." Her voice, now strident enough to cause nearby customers to pause in discomfort, brought a flicker of concern over Oliver's face. He realized that this confrontation was gearing up into something potentially volatile. As a cop, especially a black cop in uniform, he knew that the situation could spiral quickly when false accusations were thrown with such reckless abandon. Though irritation churned inside him, Oliver maintained his composure. "Ma'am, I really don't want to do this," he said gently. "You're harassing a police officer, and I must ask you to calm down. There's no need for these false claims." Yet, with every word he uttered, Leslie Marie's rage only seemed to mount, her eyes narrowing into suspicious little slits as she fumbled for her phone. For a long moment, time seemed to stretch as the morning bustle at the coffee shop froze around them. Inside, the soft murmur of conversations and the clink of coffee cups provided a stark contrast to the charged energy at the entrance. Oliver could feel the weight of everyone's eyes upon him, as if this single encounter might define his entire day. But he steeled himself, he knew that professionalism was his best armor. Taking a deep breath, he resolved that de-escalation was the only path forward. He stepped back slightly, giving Leslie Marie a respectful space while keeping a watchful eye on her. Even as she continued to shout and hurl baseless charges, Oliver's mind was already shifting towards the inevitability of involving his fellow officers. He could only hope that backup would arrive soon, not merely to validate his presence but to defuse the situation before it spiraled further out of control. In that awkward, tension-filled moment, under the early sun and before the busy day truly began, the encounter at the coffee shop had evolved from a simple morning ritual into the prelude of an unpredictable episode. For Oliver Mark, every day was a balancing act between dutiful service and the unexpected challenges posed by those who refused to see the truth for what it was. And as he waited, his pulse steadying under calm determination, he knew that it wasn't long before fate would take its next turn in this odd, little dance between duty and defiance. With Leslie Marie's tirade echoing in his ears, Oliver Mark recognized that the situation was rapidly escalating. Although the initial confrontation at the coffee shop had been unsettling, it was now clear that passive conversation would no longer suffice. Sensing imminent danger, not only to his personal safety as a black officer in uniform facing such outrageous allegations, but also to the order of the community, Oliver reached slowly for his radio. His fingers deftly pressed the appropriate button as he spoke in an even, measured tone. "This is Officer Mark. I need immediate assistance at the coffee shop on street name. I have a civilian causing a disturbance and making false accusations." Even as he finished his dispatch, the cacophony around him grew louder, voices from other customers and passers-by merged into a low buzz of anxious speculation. Leslie Marie's accusations, now bellowed amid continued protest, seemed to swell with every passing second. "You think you can intimidate me? I have rights. I have the right to feel safe and to question authority," she shrieked, her voice rising above even the clamor of the busy morning. Oliver's heart pounded beneath his steady exterior. He attempted once more to reason, his tone carrying the authority that years of service had instilled. "Ma'am, I'm asking you to calm down. You're interfering with a police officer's duty." But his plea was met with further cries of indignation, as Leslie Marie's face contorted into a mask of defiance. It was then, amid the swirl of confusion and defiant shouts, that help arrived in the form of Officer Reynolds. A battered patrol car pulled up with its lights flashing in a steady rhythm. Out stepped Reynolds, a wiry middle-aged white guy known for his quick wit and a perpetual smirk that belied the gravity of his duty. "What's going on here, Oliver?" Reynolds asked casually, his eyes twinkling as he took in the scene, a sight that was almost too comical to believe. "Just a minor misunderstanding," Oliver replied, a hint of exasperation threading his calm tone. "This woman, Leslie Marie, seems to believe I'm impersonating an officer." The corners of Reynolds' mouth twitched with amusement. His response was both a chuckle and a shake of his head. "Lady, you have no idea, Oliver here is one of the best cops we've got," he declared loudly, casting a quick glance at Leslie Marie before turning back to his partner. "I heard the dispatch call and thought I'd come see what all the fuss was about." For a brief moment, the tension seemed to dissipate as Reynolds' well-known reputation diffused the immediate hostility. His intervention injected a dose of levity into the volatile atmosphere. "Now, ma'am," Reynolds said, his tone shifting from playful to firmly authoritative, "I'm going to need you to calm down and stop harassing Officer Mark. We're just doing our job here." Leslie Marie, momentarily taken aback by Reynolds' confident display, scoffed and retorted, "I'm not harassing anyone. I'm exercising my right to question authority. You all have the right to trust nothing." Her eyes darted around wildly, as if searching for someone to affirm her erratic claims. But Reynolds was relentless. "There's a difference, ma'am, between questioning and making false accusations. Officer Mark is here legally, and he has every right to be doing his job." His voice, laced with a stern warning, left no room for further argument. The support of Reynolds, both in words and in presence, helped stabilize the rapidly deteriorating situation. By this time, Oliver's radio had crackled with a response from dispatch confirming that additional backup was on the way. As they waited, Reynolds casually stepped closer to Leslie Marie, his expression softening just enough to invite a semblance of conversation. "All right, now why don't we get your details," he said. "I'm going to need your name and address to clear up these baseless charges." A murmur rippled through the small crowd as Leslie Marie hesitated, her eyes flickering with a mix of defiance and uncertainty. For a few agonizing seconds, the standoff stretched on while Reynolds maintained his calm, unyielding stance. "You're interfering with a police investigation by making false claims, ma'am. Now, please provide that information." The pressure of the situation, coupled with Reynolds' unwavering presence, began to crack Leslie Marie's facade. Her hands trembled, and after a tense pause, she muttered her name and address in a barely audible voice. Reynolds, now with that nugget of information, immediately took out his radio and ran a quick background check, his eyes narrowing as he listened to the returned data. Almost instantly, his expression turned serious as he informed the group, "Dispatch is telling me that there's an old record here. This address is linked to illegal gambling operations and money laundering from about 5 years ago." His words carried a mix of disbelief and triumph, and even Oliver couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication amid the chaos. Leslie Marie's face drained of color. The woman who had so brazenly accused a seasoned officer of impersonation was now visibly shaken by the revelations. Her earlier rage gave way to nervous stuttering, her claims, once so vociferous, began to crumble under the weight of her past. That isn't what it looks like," she tried to insist, but Reynolds cut her off sharply. "That was a long time ago," he said, his tone heavy with sarcasm. "You were young and stupid, and now look where that's gotten you." His words, though measured, left no doubt about the seriousness of her situation. The crowd, once tense and watchful, now buzzed with whispers of disbelief as a palpable air of justice began to settle over the scene. Oliver stood quietly at the side, his posture relaxed even as the storm of events unfolded around him. He knew that once backup arrived, things would be handled according to protocol. But in that moment, as Officer Reynolds continued questioning Leslie Marie and gathering evidence of her dubious past, Oliver felt a small surge of satisfaction amid the chaos. The confrontation had crossed over from a petty accusation to something far more significant, one that would soon have lasting repercussions. The atmosphere rapidly shifted after Reynolds' stern interrogation. With backup now en route, 2 fresh-faced young officers and additional patrol cars approaching, the scene quickly transformed from a chaotic outburst into an organized operation. Reynolds took charge with ease, his demeanor transitioning from cool humor to no-nonsense authority. He addressed Leslie Marie once more, his voice low but piercing. "Now, ma'am, I'm going to need you to give me your name and address, right now. You're interfering with a police investigation and making false accusations." Leslie Marie hesitated again, her eyes flitting around as she searched for any possible escape. I don't have to tell you anything," she stammered, her earlier bravado replaced by clear anxiety. But Reynolds' next words brooked no argument. "Yes, you do," he insisted, stepping forward and closing the gap between them. "Provide me your name and address, or I'll have to take you down for obstruction." Under the heavy gaze of the onlookers and the imminent threat of further police action, Leslie Marie finally relented. With a reluctant whisper, she provided her details, her voice faltering as the words slipped out. Reynolds promptly pulled out his radio and initiated a background check, his eyes glued to the device as data streamed in. The dispatch crackled back, "Stand by, Officer Reynolds. Checking records now." For several moments, a deafening silence fell over the scene as everyone waited with bated breath. The tension was almost tangible when Reynolds' voice broke through the silence. "Dispatch, the subject's address shows no outstanding warrants or arrests. However, I'm seeing an association with property that was raided 5 years ago for operating an illegal gambling ring and money laundering. The records indicate that the owner at the time was none other than Leslie Marie herself." A murmur of shock and disbelief ran through the assembled crowd. Oliver watched, his jaw slack, as the weight of the revelation sank into the air. The confident, abrasive woman who had once hurled accusations with venom now stood vulnerable in the glare of the truth. "That can't be true," she managed to choke out, her voice barely audible over the rising hum of whispers. But the evidence spoke for itself. Reynolds' tone hardened as he continued, "This isn't just about false accusations anymore, ma'am. You're now considered a suspect in a cold case involving illegal gambling and money laundering." His words sent a chill down Oliver's spine, a reminder of how quickly a seemingly ordinary day could unravel into a web of serious criminality. As Reynolds relayed the details, the backup officers moved in with efficient precision. 2 of them, fresh from the academy and eager to prove themselves, approached cautiously. One of the young officers, his hand hovering near his sidearm, demanded in a low, determined voice, "Ma'am, please remain calm. I'm going to need you to come with us." His tone left no room for further protest. At that moment, Leslie Marie's resistance shattered completely. Screaming erupted from her as she attempted to flee, her voice a high-pitched wail of protest. The surrounding crowd recoiled as the young officers quickly moved to subdue her. In a matter of seconds, she was wrestled to the ground, a brief scuffle punctuated by her frantic cries of, "Let me go. I'm innocent," and the officer's firm commands to stop. Oliver looked on silently, his heart heavy with the irony of it all. A simple morning that had started with a peaceful coffee run had mutated into an extraordinary spectacle of justice. A spectacle where the truth, however hidden, was finally clawing its way to the surface. Reynolds, now standing over the subdued Leslie Marie, called out to the crowd with a blend of relief and finality, "You should have thought about that 5 years ago, Leslie Marie." His words, though straightforward, carried a potent message: the past would not remain buried forever. With measured care, Reynolds and the other officers placed Leslie Marie into the back of a patrol car. Her protests, muffled by the heavy door and the roar of engines, slowly faded away as she was driven toward an uncertain future marked by impending legal battles. The atmosphere, which had shifted moments before to high drama, now settled into a somber calm punctuated by relieved murmurs from the onlookers. As the patrol cars retreated, leaving behind the echoes of shattered accusations and harsh truths, Oliver allowed himself a brief moment to process the whirlwind of events. The experience had been surreal. A collision of baseless fury and deeply buried criminality that had taken the form of one embittered, entitled individual. In that moment, all the complexities of pride, authority, and accountability converged into a single, undeniable truth: justice, though sometimes delayed, always found its mark. Reynolds turned to Oliver, a slight grin softening his stern expression. "Well, Oliver," he said, clapping him on the shoulder, "looks like you caught yourself a big one this morning." His humor, though tempered by the gravity of the situation, provided a brief respite from the tension that had gripped the scene. With Leslie Marie now in custody and the evidence clear as day, Reynolds coordinated with dispatch and the arriving detective unit to secure the area. Every detail, from the checking of her records to the physical evidence of her past, was logged meticulously. In that organized chaos, the officers ensured that no stone was left unturned, and that the long-hidden criminal activities were finally brought to light. As the afternoon shadows grew longer and the bustle of the morning receded into memory, Oliver couldn't help but feel a bittersweet satisfaction. Here, in a moment that started with a farcical accusation and escalated to a major bust, the scales of justice had begun to tip in favor of truth. Every step taken, from Reynolds' decisive intervention to the backup officer's swift action, reaffirmed the commitment that both he and his colleagues held dear: to serve, protect, and ultimately, to deliver justice without compromise. In the wake of the dramatic morning events, the station buzzed with conversations about the unexpected bust. Oliver Mark found himself the center of attention. Not for a heroic act but for being part of a whirlwind that had exposed long-hidden crimes. Although much of the chaos had subsided, the repercussions continued to ripple through both the precinct and the neighborhood. As Oliver finally arrived at the precinct, an hour later than he intended, he braced himself for what he expected would be a reprimand from Sergeant Miller. Instead, the sergeant greeted him with a warm smile and a light tone that belied the gravity of the situation. "Heard you had a bit of excitement this morning, Mark. Good work, looks like you finally helped crack that gambling case we'd been chasing for ages." The compliment, though delivered casually, carried with it a deep sense of validation. Oliver's day had taken a surreal turn, transforming what began as a routine coffee stop into a major breakthrough for the department. Yet the lingering sting of the ordeal was not lost on him. He couldn't shake the image of Leslie Marie's frantic protests or the piercing disbelief in the eyes of those who had witnessed her downfall. In the days that followed, details of the case began to materialize with astonishing clarity. The detective assigned to Leslie Marie's file, a seasoned investigator with an eye for inconsistencies, reached out to Oliver for further statements. He learned that as the investigation unfolded, even more damning evidence emerged. Leslie Marie's involvement wasn't limited to a single cold case, rather, it spanned multiple criminal endeavors. Tax evasion, insurance fraud, and an offshore account containing millions, all these nefarious activities surfaced during the deep dive into her past. The revelation struck hard. The detective explained that her lavish lifestyle, once marked by designer handbags and expensive Botox injections, had been underwritten by funds that were never accounted for. Her house, which she claimed as her own, was in fact tied to an unresolved matter involving her late husband. The deed had never been legally transferred, rendering her residence a fixture of fraudulent scheming. The department now had a mountain of evidence that not only linked her to the illegal gambling ring but also exposed a web of financial deceit that stretched far beyond Maple Creek. Word of these developments spread quickly through the precinct and, soon enough, beyond its walls. Colleagues discussed the case in hushed tones over coffee, marveling at how a single 911 call had unraveled a criminal enterprise that had lain dormant for years. For Oliver, the experience was bittersweet. He had simply wanted a quiet morning coffee, yet fate had thrust him into a confrontation that not only affirmed his integrity as an officer but also showcased the remarkable way in which justice could materialize from the most unlikely of circumstances. Though the incident had been undeniably chaotic, it also brought about a sense of closure for many in the community. Neighbors who had once whispered about the commotion in disbelief now spoke openly of the consequences faced by someone who had dared to disrupt the balance of society. Oliver, however, remained modest about his role. He acknowledged the critical assistance provided by Officer Reynolds and the tireless efforts of his fellow officers, all of which had ensured that a long-standing injustice was finally addressed. In quieter moments between paperwork and routine calls, Oliver reflected on the morning's surreal events. He considered how a determined woman's attempt to question his legitimacy had inadvertently uncovered a cascade of criminal activity, a reminder that sometimes, even the most jarring encounters could lead to meaningful change. The memory of Leslie Murray's unhinged accusations would serve as a poignant lesson. That accountability and persistence had a way of cutting through pretense and corruption. Even now, as the case continued to unfold with new leads and forensic evidence coming to light, Oliver remained steadfast in his commitment to duty. The laughter shared among colleagues and the supportive nods of Sergeant Miller reminded him that every day as a cop was unpredictable, a blend of routine moments and extraordinary turns. And while he still longed for that perfect oat milk latte, he was also proud of the role he played in bringing a dangerous criminal network to justice. In the end, the tumultuous morning that began with false accusations had transformed into a turning point not only for Oliver Mark but for an entire community. Justice, it seemed, had a way of unraveling even the most carefully concealed secrets, one outrageous encounter at a time.